like to talk about is a pill the answer that we are seeking. So about my training you have heard. When I hear the word pill, I right away think about what the Talmud teaches us is that a lesson taught with humor is a lesson retained. All of you remember professors and teachers who used humor. I couldn't tell you a joke, but I can use humor when I hear some of your questions. The first one I want to put on the table before I talk about what is needed in the future is I never permitted my late husband to come to any of my talks because when I asked for questions, he would sit there where you are sitting and he would raise his hand. I would have to recognize him. He would tell all of you at this Machar conference, don't listen to her, it's all talk. And I made an exception. Fred loved Diane Sawyer. When Diane Sawyer came with 60 Minutes to my apartment in Washington Heights, where I still live, I didn't have the heart to say you can't be home. So here is Fred Westheimer and I sitting on the couch, Diane Sawyer right here. The cameras are rolling. And the first question she says, Mr. Westheimer, how is your sex life? To which Fred said, the shoemaker's children don't have shoes. So here is what I would like to put some issues on the table. I never ask personal questions, but I talk very explicitly. Even now that I just turned 85, I still talk very explicitly. So when I think about what the future holds, the first thing to think about is they're now talking, it's brand new, they are talking about a pill for women. That worries me because look what happened with Viagra. When Viagra came on the market, and when I used to tell people if you do have difficulty with your erection, go and see a urologist. If the urologist says you can take Viagra, okay. So here's what happened across the United States and Israel. He went, he got the Viagra, he now has an erection from the floor to the ceiling. He comes home, he tells, he is at home, and he says to his wife, hop into bed. Because number one, he thinks that that's the last erection of his life. And what happens is that if he forgot her birthday, if he forgot in the United States particularly, if there's a sports event on television, he might not have talked to her for 3 days. And all of you women know what that wife told him what to do with that erection. So the point is that the relationship has to be established and has to be a good one. And that holds true from the past. We have the best scientifically validated data about sexual functioning that has ever been available. We have had Kinsey with tremendous questionnaire survey about the knowledge, attitude, and practice of the American male and the American female. I say American because that's really where I live and where I have most of the knowledge. Some of you, especially researchers, should now do a duplication of that Kinsey report because the Kinsey report is 50 years old. It's too old. After Kinsey came Masters and Johnson. Masters and Johnson observed in a laboratory setting 1,400 sexual intercourse episodes, people actually having sex, penises wired up, lubrication in the vagina measured, heartbeat measured, brain waves measured, anything that could be measured was measured. We learned a great deal from that. Again, too old now, we need a new study. After Masters and Johnson came Dr. Helen Singer-Kaplan, and I worked with her for 7 years. A wonderful trainer and a wonderful model of how to train sex therapists. So we know that some things have changed. For example, in Kinsey's study, 30%, let's believe that I have a blackboard here. I will draw a normal curve. In Kinsey's studies, 30% of women do have sexual satisfaction, they have an orgasm when during intercourse. Another 30% do have sexual satisfaction when the clitoris is being stimulated either before or after intercourse. 30% of American sexually active women in his studies do not have sexual satisfaction. That number is changing as we sit here and talk, because we are talking so much about it. There is definitely more sexual literacy, so there are more women who know that a woman has to take the responsibility for her sexual satisfaction, and she has to be sexually literate. Both have to be sexually literate. For example, there is a moment before the orgasmic response where nothing happens, and very many women used to give up. They used to say nothing is happening. We have to teach for him to continue stimulating her, or for her to stimulate herself, because there is that moment, in French it's called le petit mort, before the orgasmic response, where nothing happens, and we can't have more people not to have more women not to have sexual satisfaction. When I talk about the normal curve, I gave you 30, 30, 30. What do I owe you? 10. 5% of women on the extreme of the normal curve, they are easily orgasmic. They don't need a sex therapist. The other extreme, what do I owe you? Another 5 of women. If a couple, right now I'm talking about women, walks into a sex therapist's office, a sex therapist takes what is called a sexual status examination. In the office, I ask very specific questions in order to assess if I can be of help. So those 5% on the extreme of the normal curve, if I detect that they are either depressed or alcoholic or some other issues, I will send to a psychiatrist first, because this short-term psychosexual therapy would not work with somebody who is either depressed or an alcoholic. If it's a question of teaching, of what to do, for example, we know that there is a tremendous change. There are less men who are premature ejaculators, which means they ejaculate faster than they want to. We have to teach a lot about, that's what I did in this book, with a gynecologist, sexually speaking, about menopause, because they used to think that after menopause, that's the end of sex life. In the Jewish tradition, they knew better. It says specifically that a man is obligated to provide, the husband, not just any man in the audience, the husband is obligated to provide sexual satisfaction to his wife, even after menopause, which shows us the importance of that relationship, and it showed us that they knew that sex is not only for procreation, but also for recreation. There is an interesting article which I give you for homework that was in the New York Times right a few days ago. I don't have time to discuss it, but I would like you to read it. First of all, the title is very funny. I'll have what she's having. Do you remember the movie? She did have an orgasm. There is no question, by just sitting there. But it's a very serious article. What do women want? So it's the same question that Freud used to ask already. And it talks about research and about some of the issues that are on the horizon. Interesting. In the Talmud, it says, Isha ketazriya. When a woman, they said ketazriya, which would mean ejaculate. A woman does not ejaculate. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it says, if a woman is being brought to sexual satisfaction, if she has an orgasm, before he ejaculates, she's going to bear a son. I need somebody like you here, Hebrew University, Weizmann Institute, or somebody, to do a study. Who knows, there might be something in the lubrication that is conducive to the male spermatozoa to get up there faster. We don't have a study yet. In the Jewish tradition, what we can learn is that importance of the relationship. All of you know that the Eshet Chayil, when the husband comes home on Friday night, it's, what is it, mitzvah? To engage in sexual activity. I don't want you just to think it's Friday night and pick up somebody in the audience. They are talking about a husband and a wife. But it's interesting, in that Shir HaShirim, in that Song of Songs, there is one sentence that, in my opinion, is the most sexually arousing that a husband could tell his wife. It says, there are many wonderful women out there, but he says to her, you are the best. So they knew also about the frequency. That's something that in that study, and recently very many people are increasingly saying that it's not true that women don't want to be having sex as much as men. And I do agree with that. There are very many women where if the relationship is not good, then he goes to sleep before she goes to sleep, and there's no sex in that relationship. And in the Jewish tradition, it says specifically how often different professions should have sex. For example, it says a sailor every 6 months, because he's not home. I told my daughter not to marry a sailor. So they knew about that importance of the relationship. When they talk about, will there be a pill for women, I'm worried about that. Not that I think that there shouldn't be one if she needs it and if a physician is going to prescribe it. But I am very worried these days about the relationship not going to be cultivated. That they think, all right, so you pop a pill, like as if you have a headache, and that would solve the issue of that libido, of that sexual desire. Not so, but if there are problems and if it could be helped, for example, in the sexual literacy that I talk about, we have to know that a man at a certain age, I'm not giving an exact age, because each man is different, needs physical stimulation in order to obtain and maintain the erection. A woman after menopause needs a lubrication in order to have sex, in order for sex not to be painful. So all of this is part of that sexual literacy, and I think if they will find that there is a certain pill, if people don't rely on it, if it's part of the relationship, I have no problem, because the worry is most people just, not only in Israel or in the United States, I hear that in Europe, no time for sex. Both are working, there are children, the children, if they are teenagers, it's even worse, because they never go to sleep, so there's no privacy. I tell couples to go to a motel once in a while, have a bubble bath, take some champagne, do something that is that varies the experience so that it's not going to fall asleep. The argument no time is should not really exist, because people just have to keep the time for caressing, for sexual arousal, for maybe reading some sexually explicit material. Here is something that is of interest. In Who read 50 Shades of Grey? In Israel, it was sold out the first day that the book came out in Hebrew. Interesting. Some passages in there are not to some people's liking because there are some kind of sexual activity that not everybody wants to engage in. Both people in 50 Shades of Grey are of age, so there's no question of somebody forcing. It's not required reading. You can turn the page if there is a passage that you don't like. It proves the point that I've been making all these years. Women do get aroused by sexually explicit material, either reading or on the internet or on television. So it's not true that they don't get aroused. We have had Lady Chatterley's Lover, if you remember that, 50 years ago. If you remember the book by Nancy Friday, all of the fantasies for men, for women. If you remember the book Fear of Flying. So women do get aroused, and this is important, so that they don't, the point now on that required, on the homework that I give you, is that they say, that they know that maybe some women are more sexually interested than he is. That has again to do with education, because a man has to know, and both have to know, that after a certain age, the erection after 50, it's different for each man. The erection is not as firm as it was before. The ejaculation is not as strong. The woman's orgasm is not as strong as it was before menopause. But we have to say, so what? Use whatever there is available and make sure that you keep that sex life alive. Here, right now in Jerusalem, all of you have a partner here, not? Remember what I told you? I'm old-fashioned and a square, not just to pick up somebody here. Make believe that tonight is Friday, and after the plenary session, go home, have sex, or at the hotel, those of you who come from the States, and try a new position. Tomorrow I'll be here all day, you tell me about the new position. Because maybe I can learn something else. Some people, because of modern life, turn to pills or to alcohol, which is certainly diminishing the drive, diminishing the sex life. I told you, they really gave me a quickie. I'm going to say that on television. They gave me 5 more minutes. Okay. Never mind the 5 minutes. Please, what we have to be careful is we have to bury old myths. We have to bury those myths that women are not interested in sex. We have to bury the myths of like the Puritan British Victorian mother told her daughter at the night of the wedding ceremony, lie back and think of England. We can't do that anymore. I have to say one word about the G-spot. There is a book on the market written by 3 women that inside the vagina, right next to the urethra, that there is a spot called the Grafenberg spot. If properly stimulated, would bring about a fantastic kind of an orgasm, even a female ejaculation. Careful, because I have women walking into my office saying they think they're not normal because their partner have been trying for 4 months to find their G-spot. I am not saying there's no G-spot. I am not a researcher. I need a researcher to do research to find if there is such a thing. I know that many women report some sensitivity at a particular spot, but careful. The ones that talk about female ejaculation, it might just be a few droplets of liquid. And if she does urinate, some women do, don't make a big to-do, put a towel under and make sure that the sex life remains interesting and remains varied and remains something. Don't say no time. That's what I hear most of the time, that people say no time for sex. Older people, sex in the morning, not at night when they are tired, not at night for men because the testosterone level is lower, but in the morning. Here is one of the things I learned. I taught now at Yale, at Princeton, now I'm at Columbia. I learned a great deal from the questions. The best question to give you, because you can use that tonight, is a young man called, he said Dr. Ruth. They couldn't say Westheimer, too long a name. That's how they started by saying Dr. Ruth, and now there's all of these other Dr. Phil, Dr. whatever. And he said, Dr. Ruth, my girlfriend and I, he was not Orthodox, so he did have a girlfriend and they had sex before marriage. He said, my girlfriend and I have terrific good sex. We love each other. He said, we are going to get married. He said, in order to be on my good side, he wants me to know that they are using contraceptives because they don't want to be parents right now. So I said, so what's your comment? Because sociologically speaking, these programs create like a community of listeners. People give advice to somebody who called before. He said his girlfriend likes to toss onion rings on his erect penis. And I did exactly what you are doing. I giggled because a good sex therapist has to visualize what people do. And then it permitted me to use it as a teaching moment. I said, anything two consenting adults do on their kitchen floor, living room couch, bedroom, is perfectly all right. Those of you who have partners here, tonight, onion rings. Let me have some questions. Whoever asks me a good question, I have a keychain, Sex for Dummies. Here's a microphone. Can I have a question? Here's one. There's another one. You have to walk very fast. They give me half an hour for a quickie. Okay.
Thank you. It was very interesting. I don't know if my question will deserve this little. I don't know if my question will deserve the little pins, but I read a research that saying that basically after 3 to 5 years together, evolution has made the human species survive due to the fact that once you have babies, you take care of the baby, take 9 months, 3 years to take care.
Let me tell you something. For you specifically, here, I'll have what she's have is the answer to your question. The most important point, I give you keys 10. The most important point is boredom has to be thrown out of the bedroom. If it's the same position, if it's the same night of the week, if it's not a little bit adventure, in the Talmud it says, a man can do with his wife as he pleases, even from behind. That does not mean anal intercourse, that means inserting the penis into the vagina from behind. For a sex therapist, a very interesting position to teach because it permits the clitoris to be stimulated either by him or by her. So we can learn a lot of things. The boredom is the most, it's even worse than saying, I'm tired. The boredom has a kind of a connotation that there's something wrong in the whole relationship. Then it's not only being bored during the sexual act, but being bored with each other. Careful about that. Okay, one more.
Hi, this is a little bit more serious of a question. I work as an oncology nurse, and a lot of my patients, they're either tired afterwards or there are other issues, among many other things. What advice would you give me to give them as far as continuing having sex? Because there's a lot of issues there.
I have to tell you that I just did a book for the, I'm not a medical person, I just did a book for the caretaker of Alzheimer's disease. Not for the Alzheimer patient, but for the caretaker, either the family or the paid caretaker, what they have to do to take care of themselves. And there is a whole field that has to be taken care of because some lose inhibitions. Some, since you are a nurse, some patients want to start a relationship with you. You have to, we do not have enough sex courses to teach medical students, nursing students, social workers about the issue of sexuality and how to protect themselves. I give a talk at the Jewish Theological Seminary to rabbis and cantors who are graduating, what to do in order to be careful about congregants wanting to have a relationship. So the libido, there's a lot to be learned about how to be protected. We do not have enough courses like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, right here.
Hello, my name is Alon. I'm working at changing the attitude towards sex in Israel by helping parents and educators talk to kids about sex. So in the 21st century, in light of all the changes, what would be your one message to parents in Israel that you'd like to say?
The first thing I would say, anybody who is a counselor, an educator, who is in a camp or at school, to have a seminar, for one session with the parents first, to tell the parents what you are going to talk about, and then to take a shoebox, let children, any age, put questions in, take the subject matter seriously, even with a smile, but take it seriously, and to be very careful about not asking specific personal questions. I have to say one more thing about that. I changed my mind. I used to say to parents and educators like you, not to look into children's diaries, that it's private. I changed my mind. Parents and educators must know what their young people see on the internet. Because young people put gossip, they put pictures of their genitalia, they think they can retrieve it. It cannot be retrieved, as all of you know. Not too long ago, a Rutgers student committed suicide because somebody filmed him in a sexual encounter. It wasn't the only problem he had, but that gave him like the push. So we cannot not talk about it. It's a very important, it's the most important subject matter. But to tell parents what you do so that they don't say, what's the matter with you? Why do you have sex on your mind? Okay, we have to finish. Okay, I want you to, please, those of you who have partners, different position tonight, let me know I need to learn something new, even at the age of 85. Toda rabba.
They barely give you any time, and I wanted to ask you a question.